This video is presented by Bookie.ag. What's up, guys? Here are my predictions for UFC 247 happening this Saturday. I am not going to lie, it's not the best card. It's actually very equivalent to the last card, UFC 246, but I would actually say that 246 was a little bit better than this one. Even though this has two title fights at the top of it, the stylistic matchups, the probability of action and excitement is most likely not compared to UFC 246. But we still have some good fights, and we're going to start with Derrick Lewis versus Olear Latifi. Very interesting fight where there's going to be a lot of change of weight for this fight. Derrick Lewis has lost a lot of weight coming into this fight. I believe his walk-around weight was 295 for his last fight, and he really wants to shave some of that off. And Olear Latifi is coming up from light heavyweight, a pretty big jump, and he's going to be at a major size discrepancy against Derrick Lewis. I mean, the height difference is huge. 6'3" compared to 5'10", and Latifi honestly doesn't even look 5'10". But when we look at it historically, fighters who go up in weight generally do very well. They're very effective because of their speed advantage. The striking is usually what gets them ahead, because striking is a lot reliant on speed, elements of surprise, and knock out the opponent, and that's what you usually see from Conor McGregor to Henry Cejudo, to Thiago Santos, to Anthony Smith, Daniel Cormier, to Kelvin Gastelum. I mean, you could just go through the list. But when it comes to grappling and wrestling, that's where a lot of these guys jumping weight have a hard time. Rafa dos Anjos, even Kelvin Gastelum against Chris Weidman, right? The wrestling relies a lot more on size than striking does. But that's the thing in this fight. Olear Latifi doesn't have to really worry about the wrestling of Derrick Lewis. If anything, Latifi can take down Lewis because of Lewis's posture. His stance allows opponents to get in on his legs very, very quickly. And Lewis is not the most tricky opponent. Doesn't do anything that really surprises you. The only thing that might be a little bit shocking is the fact that his right hand is very well timed and it comes out quicker than his opponents expect. That right overhand of his, right uppercut in this case, could be the only element of surprise. Yes, he throws those switch high kicks, and if you don't see the setup initially, the high kick might be able to do some devastating damage, but Lewis does really telegraph the setup. He doesn't mask it behind a jab, behind any kind of movement. His footwork patterns are very plotting, and I believe Latifi can easily see everything that Lewis is going to throw at him. So that goes to my prediction for this fight. I'm going to go with Olear Latifi. I think he's going to look pretty good. I think the trend of moving up weight classes and performing very well is going to take place in this fight. We know Latifi is a much, much better wrestler. He is much more athletic. He's much faster, and he has knockout power. He just has to watch out for the right hand. He has to watch out when they get up from the ground, because Lewis will let his hands go and try to KO you senseless any opportunity you give him. Look what he did to Marcin Tybura, where Tybura was winning the fight. Just one clinch exchange, just one lapse of action, and Derrick Lewis found the chin of Tybura and put him out. Derrick Lewis, for the most part, he's losing almost all of his fights, but he just lands the right hand because of some big error that his opponent makes. From Travis Brown to Alexander Volkov, even to Marcin Tybura. It's happened many times in Derrick Lewis's career where he has won by just landing that right hand of his when he's losing the contest. And that's another big X factor in this fight as well. But I'm going to go with Olear Latifi, and I'm actually going to go by a third round TKO. Now, it's interesting that they have Derrick Lewis as the favorite. He's actually a pretty big favorite at minus 237, according to my bookie. Yes, Derrick Lewis can find that shot. Yes, he's a bigger fighter. It's not like I'm saying that Olear Latifi is 100% going to win this fight. I just see a lot more of a chance, a lot more probability on his side. Latifi, though, mentally, he will shut down in fights, especially the bigger fights of his career. This is one of his biggest fights. So we can see him kind of shrink under the lights like we sometimes see from him. But I think the big weight cut might have an effect on that. And then we go to the sleeper of the card, and one of the best fights in my opinion. Marissa Backtick versus Dany. Now, Backtick has been a top 15 fighter for some time, and Dany is starting to make his way up there. He's finally facing his first ranked opponent. Now, a guy who has trained with Khabib Nurmagomedov, he's going to do very well against the wrestling of Backtick, and Dany is a great wrestler as well. Backtick's wrestling approach is going to be challenged, and that's going to force Backtick to exchange on the feet. Now, their striking style is actually very similar, but Marissa Backtick is a lot more risk-taking. They both have a very fundamental boxing style. They don't throw too many kicks, keep their hands high, very square stance. They use their left hand a lot. Ige uses a lot more to fake some things to get some openings, whereas Backtick will throw that left hook a lot. And when Backtick throws his hands, he leaves himself a lot more open. He's looking for the knockout, but in return, he leaves himself open. Ige doesn't do this. Ige will throw the right overhand, which will open him up a little bit, but his left hook is very, very tight, and he throws it as a retraction to anything else. Against Kevin Aguilar, you saw this as well. He dropped him with that very short left hook, moving away, trying to get back into his stance and separate. And I believe the collision of skill when it comes to that is going to favor Dan Ige massively. and the fact that Marissa Backtick has taken a lot of damage in his career. Just got knocked out by Josh Emmett, got knocked out before by Darren Elkins badly. Dan Ige hasn't taken nearly the same kind of damage that Marissa Backtick has. So my prediction for this fight, it should be a very close fight. They are very similar in a lot of ways, and Backtick is the bigger fighter, where I will say that Ige is the more technical fighter. I'm going to go with Dan Ige in this one. I'm going to go by a decision. I can see a late TKO. Marissa Backtick is a slight favorite. Again, I see this fight being very close, and I understand that Backtick is the bigger fighter. He is the more experienced fighter. And maybe Ige's UFC debut loss might have stuck with him for this, but again, I'm going to slightly lean to Dan Ige. And then we go to the co-main event, Valentina Shevchenko versus Kaitlyn Chookagian. Right off the bat, I will have to say that Shevchenko has a massive advantage in pretty much every area of the game besides just general movement. Kaitlyn moves a lot more, but what does that really matter if you're not landing strikes, if you're not setting things up with a proper angle, if you're not able to get the takedowns off those angles? When it comes to strike for strike, takedown for takedown, submission for submission, position for position, Shevchenko trumps Kaitlyn Chookagian in almost every area. The problems that Chookagian will pose to Shevchenko are the height advantage, the reach advantage, and the fact that she doesn't engage that much. So it's going to force Shevchenko, almost like in her last fight with Liz Carmouche, it's going to force Shevchenko into more of a stalking and waiting game, right? Because Shevchenko does her best work as a counter striker. And when you don't engage the way Chookagian does, because she is more of a counter striker, or someone like a Holly Holm figure who just moves a lot and looks for the perfect opening to explode, it's going to be very hard for Shevchenko to create any damage, and also for Chookagian. But I will say that Shevchenko is going to land a lot of leg kicks. Chookagian fights more like a karate fighter, and she has a boxing background. She moves a lot laterally, and I think those leg kicks are going to add up points and eventually make Chookagian attempt something eventually. And I think Shevchenko is going to either counter her, but I see more of that duck in, body lock, and getting Chookagian to the ground, controlling the position. Chookagian is a good BJJ fighter. She's very good defensively, so I do see her defending a lot of the submissions, especially the transition attempts. And at the end, I see this fight being a little bit lackluster, not too much action going on, and I see Shevchenko winning through a decision. I think she's going to win every single round. I could see maybe one round to Chookagian, just because she landed like one or two more strikes, nothing crazy. Now, we all know whenever Shevchenko fights, she's always a lopsided favorite unless she's fighting at bantamweight. Minus 1400 is a little bit too big though. Chookagian does have a small chance of victory. I do not think that Shevchenko should even be like a minus 9,800. A little bit under that, man, because minus 1400 is like saying that Chookagian has absolutely no chance of winning. And we've seen many times whenever odds are this far apart, upsets tend to happen. And then we go to the main event, Jon Jones versus Dominick Reyes. One of the greatest of all time, depends what you put in that criteria, PEDs or not, whatever. Technically, skillfully, one of the greatest of all time, 100%, versus the new up-and-comer in Dominick Reyes. And this is the first time in Jon Jones' career he's fighting the next generation of fighters. And that is the most interesting thing to me for this one, because historically, when we look at every single dominant champion, from GSP to Anderson Silva to Dominic Cruz to Jose Aldo, whenever they have to fight that next generation, they get completely shut out, or they have the fight of their lives. Anderson Silva with Chris Weidman, right? This is actually a very similar case to that fight, looking at the experience and looking at the demeanor. And when you look at GSP, when he fought Johnny Hendricks, right? That was the only guy of the next generation he fought, and that was the hardest fight in his entire career that he hadn't lost. Dominic Cruz, when he fought Cody Garbrandt, same thing, got shut out completely. Jose Aldo, when he fought Max Holloway, I understand with the Conor McGregor thing, but when he fought Max Holloway, who was the next generation, completely shut out, especially in the rematch. And this is Jones' first test to compete up against the next generation of athlete, next generation of intellect, maybe, because the next generation has the privilege to watch some of those older fighters, especially a guy like Jon Jones, and think about him for years. That's exactly what Chris Weidman did against Anderson Silva, right? When Weidman came into the UFC, Anderson was already a dominant champion. When Dominick Reyes made his MMA debut in 2014, Jon Jones was already a dominant champion who went through the murderer's row. And that alone is going to pose a problem to any dominant champion. A young prospect who has molded himself to actually eventually compete up against that dominant champion. It's the dream of theirs to eventually be against that man. They have developed things specifically for that champion throughout the years. The champion is almost up against a kryptonite at times, right? So that alone, I do expect somewhat of a challenge for Jones in this one. But technically, how do they compare to each other? So I will say that Jones is the more well-rounded fighter. Throws a lot more different techniques, from elbows to knees to punches to kicks to takedowns to anything in the clinch to anything on the ground. He does a lot more than Dominick Reyes does, but that necessarily doesn't mean that Jones is going to win, because it also comes down to efficiency. Everything Dominick Reyes does is efficient. Even though he has less tools, everything he does is at a high level. From his left hand, to his left kick, to his movement, to his angle work, to his takedown defense. Yes, I understand the Volkan Oezdemir fight exposed maybe of his takedown defense, but when he fought Chris Weidman, who was a much better wrestler than Volkan, and isn't that small, easily defended the takedowns. No difficult at all. And Dominick Reyes alluded that his game plan was not to defend takedowns against Volkan, so when those takedowns presented themselves, Reyes didn't have a solution. Now that could be a double-edged sword for Dominick Reyes, because if everything goes by the plan, Reyes is a nightmare to deal with. But if Jones starts doing things that Reyes didn't expect at all, Reyes himself can fall apart. And that is also a very interesting thing, because Jon Jones has a very similar mindset as well. He goes by game plans, he's a very smart fighter, he will research his opponent, and if things don't go by what he expects, usually it tends to be a harder fight. But I will 100% say that Jon Jones is a lot better at adapting under the circumstances, right? When things aren't going his way exactly how he planned out, he is better to adapt. Dominick Reyes, from that Volkan Oezdemir fight, it didn't look like he adapted that well. Yes, he technically won the fight, but his wrestling looked really weak in that one, man. Really, really weak. And he just could not adapt to it. He could not fix the mistakes. He couldn't fix the takedown defense mid-fight. While Jon Jones will be able to do so, like when he saw him fight Alexander Gustafsson, right? Able to strike with Gustafsson for 5 rounds. Yes, I'll struck here and there, but able to go toe-to-toe with the guy. He wasn't completely shut out in the striking like Reyes was against Volkan when it came to the wrestling. But I do expect Reyes to expect the wrestling of Jon Jones, exactly what he's going to be able to do. Jones does have a good double leg, especially from the outside. He doesn't really mask it behind anything too much, but his major takedowns come from the clinch, from the trips to the throws to just a lot of misdirection. Reyes, I believe, is going to be able to defend the takedowns of Jon Jones. I don't see the wrestling be too much of an issue, especially early on in the fight. I actually think it's the striking and the clinch work and the pressure if Jones is going to go down that route. Jones can pressure or not pressure, and I think that's the major thing that Reyes just doesn't know. Is Jones going to get in his face? Is Jones going to get in the clinch? Is Jones going to stay far away and pick at him from a distance? I have a feeling that that is the part that Reyes does not really have a clue on until he gets in there on fight night. But that is a very, very important detail. You have to know what Jones is going to do. Is he going to do what he did against Glover Teixeira and get in his face? Right, the last thing everybody thought that Jones was going to do, he went and did it, and he was very successful in it. Is he going to stay at a distance like he did against OSP or even Anthony Smith? If you cannot figure out or adapt to that detail of Jon Jones, you are not going to be able to adapt to his strikes in that type of aggression and maybe even his takedowns, right? You have to get his pressure and aggression down first, where he wants to strike and where he wants to be in front of you, before you can get his striking and wrestling down. And that first step is something that's very unpredictable about Jon Jones. You never really know where he wants to be at, generally from a far distance, but against a guy like Reyes who snipes, it's probably better for Jones to get in close and work the dirty boxing, work the elbows, get in the clinch, take away that long range power. Yes, Reyes has good uppercuts, but that is something that Jones can work around. That is something he's seen from Dominick Reyes time and time again whenever fights get in close. But generally, Reyes likes to be at a far distance. Volkan Oezdemir, again, expose a little bit of that inside striking of Dominick Reyes. So there is a path for Jones to mix up his aggression and mix up his work in space. But the thing that's going for Dominick Reyes in this one is, whenever Jones is on the defense, Reyes has the best style so far that Jones has ever fought in his career to get by that post, to get by that lead hand of his that he likes to extend on your face, extend on your shoulder, and keep distance as he moves away from you. And he keeps his chin pretty high up when he does this. Reyes is a master of redirection, master of angles. The guy is landing uppercuts, left hands, kicks, and every kind of body type in many different styles so far. From the short, powerful Jared Cannonier to the long, unpredictable OSP, the guy has landed these shots at different angles at a mere snap of a command. I mean, if you tell Reyes, redirect now, angle now, he will take that angle immediately at an instant and land something. And he can get by that reach because of it. Now, generally, he's able to do this when opponents are backing him up. But I am pretty sure Reyes is going to be efficient at going on the offense with this, which is something he has to do. Jones is the most predictable on the defense. On the offense, Jones is very hard to deal with. It's very hard to know what he's going to do. On the defense, you know generally what he's going to do. It's almost the same thing in every single fight for years now. He looks away a lot. He extends his lead arm a lot. He will block the right side with his right hand. He just tries to push you away. Everything he does is to push you away and reset the action. And that is exactly where Dominick Reyes has to capitalize. If he can get by that lead hand one time, Jones is going to be in big trouble throughout the fight, because that will confirm that Reyes can connect on Jones, confirm that Reyes can get in the range he wants, at the angle he wants to connect on Jones. So my prediction for the fight, I am going to go with Jon Jones. I do see the holes of Dominick Reyes, and I do know that Jon Jones has many ways to go about and win this fight. But I will also say, even looking at my percentages here, Dominick Reyes has a real chance of winning this fight. Jones is almost a minus 500 favorite, and Dominick Reyes a plus 370. I mean, that is a bit too much. I will put that a lot closer together. The gap is not that big, man. So at the end, I'm going to go with Jon Jones, and I'm actually going to go by a 4th round submission. I think eventually he's going to take down Reyes and probably find a Kimura or an Americana in side control. Now, it's all going to come down to what Jon Jones is going to do and whether Dominick Reyes has the plan to counter that approach of Jones, right? By going down and looking at all the fights of Dominick Reyes and Jon Jones, especially recently, that knowledge can be very beneficial, especially when you go and bet on it with mybookie.ag. There are some odds in the card. They are a bit shocking, but it is still a little bit early, so playing as fast as possible is going to be much more beneficial of maximizing your results. So go and bet on mybookie.ag. No one gives you more ways to win than they do. It has the fastest payouts and better lines than any other sportsbook. Very easy to use, and I would not be telling you guys to bet with them if they weren't the best. And if you're someone who likes to bet a little but win a lot, you could try a parlay. With multiple picks that you're confident in, you could put your picks in a lineup, and if all of the picks come through, you multiply your winnings. And if you join now, MyBookie will match your first deposit halfway all the way up to $1,000. That means if you deposit $2,000, you get $1,000 in free money to play with. Just use the promo code WEASEL to activate the offer. That's promo code WEASLE to take advantage of MyBookie's sign-up offer. Visit mybookie.ag today. You play, you win, you get paid. Now, the lines on this card are very interesting. You have one like Alex Morono, like a 3-1 favorite over Kaitlyn Williams, which is huge. Very close fight in my opinion. I can even see Kaitlyn Williams winning this fight. Morono obviously has a little bit of an advantage when it comes to experience, when it comes to overall technique, but I do believe it's going to be a very closely contested fight, and the odds are pretty crazy for that one. Andrea Lee being almost a 4-1 favorite over Lauren Murphy. I'm actually going with Lauren Murphy in this one because I do think she's a better grappler overall. She's a lot more experienced as well. She has done pretty well. Andrea Lee has a lot of close fights in her career. She isn't the most technical fighter. She's very strong and physical, and I do possibly see Murphy taking it to the ground and winning through points or maybe even a late submission. Juan Adams versus Justin Tafa. That's a very close fight. Justin Tafa is more powerful. He's a better striker overall. Juan Adams is a better grappler and wrestler overall. So if it comes to that kind of thing, I think Adams is going to have an advantage, taking it to the ground, maybe even have a better gas tank. Tafa did get knocked out senseless in his last fight, and that is the driving force, I believe, of him being such a big underdog. So those are my predictions, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you did, make sure you give it a thumbs up. If you enjoyed my content, make sure to subscribe. I have a very weird feeling about that main event, man. I think too many people are underestimating Dominick Reyes, but we will see, and I'll see you guys then.